Hello, we are here at Rose City Comic Con, and today is the last day of the show, and we are nearing the end of the last day of the show here, so bear with me if I'm a little tired. But it has been very fun so far. I'm Kara, I'm with Dark Horse. We are actually at the Dark Horse booth right now, and with me is Ben Dewey.
Hello, everybody.
Who is working on Beasts of Burton with us right now.
That's right.
And we are going to ask him just some fun questions. But first, I will start with a quick question about Beasts of Burton.
Okay.
What is your favorite thing about working on that series so far?
So there's a ton of stuff I like. One of my favorite things is that I get to learn about different dog breeds and then get a sense of how their body mechanics work. I'm, at this point, probably better at drawing dogs than I am at people. So it forces me to practice to try and catch up to my dog knowledge. So that's my favorite thing. It's like also trying to work on things like facial expression and what tools you have there, because in some cases, if I'm drawing an Old English sheepdog and you don't get to see the eyes unless it's very specifically described in the panel, you have to do stuff like you tilt the head, or you do a shadow pattern, or you have to do things with the shadow around the mouth. It's very complicated, but it's a really great visual and intellectual puzzle every time I get a script.
Yeah, your work on Beasts of Burton is fantastic, and if you're not familiar with the comic, I should mention that it is about a bunch of dogs and a couple of cats who basically are paranormal or occult investigators, and it's written by Evan Dorkin. Currently, Ben, again, is on the art, and he's doing an amazing job. Jill Thompson also is the co-creator of it, so she has been contributing as well. Wise Dogs and Eldritch Men is the most recent series, and we have a new trade collection coming out in a matter of days, so you can get that at your comic shop next week. And in other related things, Ben, what is your least favorite thing to draw?
I'm not a super huge fan of drawing period correct stuff, where you have to look up things and make sure you get all the architectural details right. And part of that is just because I'm playing into my own tendencies of being a perfectionist, and half the time I don't think people are noticing. That, or if I have to draw bicycles, are not great because it's easy to get them wrong, hard to get them right. And like when I at one point did some Stranger Things fan art, and it was the nexus of all the things that drive me nuts, period correct bicycles. So like if you're ever going to draw some Stranger Things art, don't add the bikes. They're cool, but it took forever.
Noted. You're not the first artist to say that at this show. Actually, period costumes and the like are apparently quite challenging, and I believe it.
I will say I do love drawing Victorian and what's it called when the Queen is Regency. I like those period dresses. That taught me a lot. Okay. Because I love drawing the fabric. That part's fun. So that's my one caveat for saying I don't. It's more like men's suits from the 40s. It's another thing that's easy to get wrong. Like you don't want to do too much pleating if you draw a lot of the folds in the fabric. That indicates a softer fabric, and a lot of young artists will get it wrong, and I get it wrong sometimes too, but suits are more crisp, and it's just strange. Yeah.
There's a lot of detail involved in that, yeah. Well, I have another kind of fun question for you on that note. When you are working, do you like to listen to music, and if so, what kind?
So I listen to a lot of rock and roll. So one of my favorite bands right now is a band called Big Wreck. They're from Canada, fronted by this guy Ian Thornley. And if he had been available in the 80s to front a band, he'd be the biggest rock star in the world. He's amazing. He can sing like Chris Cornell, he can shred like Paul Gilbert, and he writes genuinely good songs. He's amazing. So, but sometimes I'll do that when I'm doing something like thumbnails, because I'm trying to pay attention to script and make sure that I get mood and story flow and all that stuff correct. But when I'm just doing drawing, I don't have to think about it. It's an automatic process. So I like to listen to podcasts about neuroscience and philosophy and physics and anything I can find that has science in it. And so sometimes luckily a friend of mine named Eva Dyer and I are doing some scientific illustration together, and it's been a blast. So all of that work while I was drawing dogs paid off, so that when I had to draw science, I know how to do it.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's super fun.
Well, are there any other projects that you're working on right now that you'd like to talk about a little bit, or?
Yeah, so right now I'm working on a webcomic that my mentor Steve Lieber told me needed some revision. So I'm going back and trying to streamline it and make a rule for myself to make it more succinct and try and make it less of a bummer. So like, even if it hints at the idea that you're going to make something sad, try to avoid that and, judo flip that into something that is relatable, succinct, and genuinely funny. And if you ask somebody for advice, that's something I always tell people. It's like, if you're not prepared for them to give you advice that contradicts your own feelings, don't ask. Because I asked Steve, and at first I was bummed out, but then he gave me some really good advice that I've had a chance to apply. So my webcomic is called Meowsker Town, and it's available through my Patreon. And I think I'm going to keep it going for at least another year and see if I can make it as good as I hope it can be, like Tragedy series was when I first started that.
Both of which are excellent, by the way. I think I first found you through the Tragedy series years ago, maybe at the show.
It's probably my favorite thing I ever made, and it's as close to like seeing inside my head as I've ever been able to achieve. So that's what I'm hoping I can do with this thing. Make a little bit of rules for myself, set some boundary conditions, and try and make it as fun as I can.
That's awesome. Well, final question for you before we let you go. Do you have any upcoming convention appearances or any place you think people should look for you or your work?
Oh, sure. So in this last year, I've been trying to avoid doing some conventions. But I would say you can find me on Twitter, you can find me on Instagram, and I promised Chris Somney's wife about 4 years ago I would make a series of videos for kids about how to draw. So I'm saying this out loud so that I have to do it. So I'm going to try and post those on my Instagram and just do little 30-second things where I walk people through fun stuff you can do with kids from age 5 to adulthood.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ben, for taking some time.
Asking me.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll let you go, and we're almost to the end of Rose City Comic Con.
Bye,
so thank you, and goodbye.